Hi, welcome to another ninth, not another, just a ninth lockdown discussion with Influx Press. Today, I'm finding it hard, Gary. I'm telling you, mate.
You sounded tired there, worn out.
a little bit exhausted from the whole thing, but we're still alive and healthy and talking to each other, so that's a good thing. Right. So today we're talking about why we do this. What's the point? I'm going to try and get a little bit more light on my face. Is that working? Who knows? Anyway, but we'll start by asking you, Gary, what have you been reading this week?
Yes, we're trying to inject a little bit of fun at the beginning of each episode, aren't we?
Trying.
So I think the other week I mentioned I was reading, to be honest, a slightly boring book about the English Civil War, and I put out on Twitter it was a bit dry. Looking for kind of interesting, I suppose, novels and films, art basically set during that kind of period of the English Civil War, because I think it's very, very interesting. I think it's very ripe for fiction, but there doesn't really seem to be that much of it. Anyway, someone recommended this book to me, which is Ronan Bennett's Havoc in its Third Year, which is a fantastic title for a book. Actually set just before the English Civil War, but it's about a town in the north of England where that kind of devout Puritanism takes on more and more of control, and it seems to be turning into a kind of mini fascistic sort of mini state. They really don't like the Irish or the Catholics.
No, not big fans.
No. But it's more kind of getting into that, how these things convert into power plays. So if you voice that you suspect someone of popery, then that will probably help you up the social ladder. Really good so far. Fantastically well written. Really interesting. I enjoy reading about fiction about this sort of time period, like when is it, 17th century, in the run up to the Civil War. I think it's really fertile ground.
Interesting that we're talking on a day where the Orwell Prize for Political Fiction has been announced.
It has, yeah. I just took a quick glance at it. I haven't seen the full shortlist yet.
Don't think they even listen to our prizes edition of this.
No, I'm not sure.
Lockdown discussion show.
One other thing I was going to say, not reading but watching. I just finished watching Gangs of London, and I absolutely adored it. So if anyone else likes incredibly violent London crime drama,
I like incredibly violent London crime drama.
But it's really well done. It's not. I hate to say, when you watch like a BBC show like Luther or something, you think, I just wish this was a bit better, had a bit more money behind it. This feels like something like that, but with like American money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's sweet Donna. Okay. Nice.
Probably a controversial thing I just said there, but anyway, Gangs of London, absolutely loved it.
Okay.
What about you? What have you been reading?
I'm reading 3 things at the moment. One I think you've already read, so we can talk about that in a second. The first is this absolute tome, which is Mark Fisher's collected essays, unpublished and collected and unpublished writings of Mark Fisher. It doesn't include Capitalist Realism, the book, inside, but it's basically all of his, 1,000 pages of all his essays. Really interesting to read, reflect on what's going on right now, and the writing is always very punchy, and he's always got really interesting stuff to say. What I like about Mark Fisher's writing is he always tends to apply political theory to popular culture, which I think is a really interesting way of doing things, and it means you get to talk about normal people, what normal people do.
Yeah, and personal experience. I got a huge amount out of reading his work. He managed to articulate certain things I'd kind of felt but never been able to kind of put it into language before.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, we both like music a lot. The way he writes about music, I think, is fantastic as well. And the second thing I'm going to show you, excuse me, I'm going to cough, is this book I picked up in Spain a couple of maybe last year, which is Camus' L'Étranger, or what do you call it in English? The Outsider.
It's called The Stranger or The Outsider, depending
Mm.
which translation you pick up.
So this is Spanish, obviously, El Extranjero, and it's a comic of the novel, but it's good for my Spanish learning. So I really like this. It's really beautiful, well put together.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's having read it, obviously read the story, the book, the novel itself. It makes it really easy to follow because you don't really need to know the plot line because you already know the plot. So in terms of reading in a different language, it's quite interesting. And then
the plot of that book's fairly basic, isn't it? It's a basic plot. It's not really about. It's not about the plot, is it?
No, not a lot happens. No. And then the third one I thought we could both talk about is Holly Watson's Never Seen the Sea.
Oh yes,
which is published by Open Pen, one of their novelettes. What did you think of this? I really liked it. I thought it was very funny.
I loved it. I think I read it in probably one sitting. It's very rare for me to say that I want a book to be longer. I almost always want something to finish before it finishes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it was incredibly perceptive, funny. I presume Holly Watson's sort of the same age as us. The kind of feel of 90s England as a teenager, although obviously we're from Kent, not from the Midlands. It just felt spot on to me, but it didn't feel like a sort of nostalgia piece.
No,
but the period detail was sad to think of your own teenagerhood as kind of period drama now, but the period detail just seems absolutely spot on, I think. And
I thought it did the 90s really well, but like you say, it wasn't necessarily nostalgic. It was more funny and kind of taking the piss out of it at the same time. And loads of stuff about Gladiators, the TV show, and like little different bits of cultural reference, and also some of the products that they were eating and stuff like that. I thought it was really funny and also very tender. So it's a very tender book in terms of the way it portrayed its characters, and it's basically a normal working class family just doing what they do,
and essentially kind of a coming of age story, isn't it?
I think so.
Done really well, I think. I would read more of her work.
One to watch.
Yeah,
could we say?
Definitely.
I wonder if by talking about her, we've now ruined everything, because someone from Vintage or Jonathan Cape will go, I'll take her, thank you very much. And then, that's it.
That was a weary statement, wasn't it? Well, I think that's a good segue.
That was the idea, Gary. Yeah. That's why it was slightly laboured.
I did wonder where you were going with it.
Yeah. So, speaking of Jonathan Cape, who is part of Penguin Random House, which is a corporate Big Five publisher, we are not working at Jonathan Cape, and we run our own independent publishing house, Influx Press. And today we're going to talk about why the hell we do that, and what we like about it and what we get out of it, really. Maybe not specific to Influx. I mean, it could be this could be specific to anybody who works at an independent press, but it's our kind of experience, I suppose, our kind of understanding and
and I wouldn't want to speak for anyone else. People have all kinds of different motivations for doing what they do.
Well, I think the first thing that anybody who works in an independent publishing house is not motivated by is money.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, there are definitely easier
better ways to make money,
ways of making a living, and I think that's pretty much common knowledge. But maybe in the sense that don't you think that's true almost in terms of starting your own business in general? It's usually quite hard at the beginning, regardless of what you do.
Yeah, but I didn't expect it to be hard all the way through.
Well, I suppose for us, the thing is, as you know, as I've said about 1 million times in interviews and stuff when we've been asked about this, Influx didn't start with a plan, did it?
No.
We didn't actually think, right, we want to set up an independent published house. We wanted to create a single anthology. And it kind of went from there. So, if we'd started with a kind of a plan, things would have been very different. I don't know if they would have been better, but it's impossible to say, isn't it? So, it was never intended to be like a kind of essentially a full-time occupation?
No, yeah, and I think that's probably. I think if we were to do it again, let's say, we definitely would have a plan.
Yeah, yeah.
But I quite like this. One of the things I like about it is that we didn't have a plan, and actually it's all been quite organic, and we just kind of rolled with the whatever the developments have been. So yeah, I think if we start again, we would definitely have maybe a business plan at least.
Yeah.
It's taken us quite, I'd say a long while. It took us a long while to make any significant amount of money in order to expand and stuff like that. But like I said, it's not really about the money. But I guess I'll ask you a first question really. If see, we can put money things aside because I don't think that's necessarily relevant to any of this. But I think by now, both of us have enough editorial experience and enough publishing experience that we could, if there were a job available, I'm not saying we'd walk into it, but we would be able to apply with confidence to a commissioning editor or editorial position at a big publishing house with a decent wage, lovely office, looking over the river, and that sort of stuff. And have you ever thought about that? And B, if the opportunity did come up, would you be tempted at all?
At this point now of where Influx is, no.
Okay.
As you know, I did work for 2 years as initially as a desk editor and then an acquiring editor for Titan Books, and which I got a lot out of that job. I enjoyed aspects of that job, but at this point now, I'd be chucking away everything we're doing at Influx. It would be impossible to really do both things at the same time. At this point, there's so much to do, and I really wouldn't at this point. I feel that we've built Influx up to a point where it's got a really kind of good momentum. The Corona tried to dent a little bit, but we're still going strong, I think. And
yeah.
I just wouldn't do it. I mean, even if it was silly money, I've always kind of hated having a boss. I've always hated it. I quite enjoy working. I enjoy the work we do, and I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I think I'm quite disciplined when it comes to doing the work. But I actually get more motivation out of working for Influx than I ever did working for a boss or anything like that. I hated being part of a company. I hated making money for essentially other people, when I thought I've got enough skills where I could be doing something I'm really passionate about.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up a couple of things there. So, you're talking about working for Influx. So Influx is its own entity, rather than saying, you didn't say working for yourself, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. So I think. Sorry, just to cut you off there. I think, as I observe it in kind of modern British middle class professional working culture that we are a part of, the focus is definitely on you, the individual, and your career journey. And you might stay at a company for, I don't know what the average is now, but maybe 3 years is probably, especially earlier on in your career, probably quite standard. I think people move up, but they move by moving to different companies.
You tend not to have the company man or woman anymore.
Not at least in the publishing industry, I don't think, especially in editorial, because I think people look that they should be moving to the next step. So that's actually, I think, it's not an insult, but that's quite a self-centered focus. That's a focus on the individual's career.
Yes.
Now, of course, I'm interested in my career, but I'm essentially more interested in making Influx Press succeed, and that gives a different kind of motivation.
Right. Well, and also, if you were to, let's say, I don't know, get a job at Hachette, for example, I'd say commissioning editor or whatever, you're never going to get to CEO. I mean, I'm sorry. I just don't see you as CEO material. No, but so effectively, the control the control you have now and your position with Influx as a co-owner, co-director, you can never replicate that at a corporate publishing house.
No.
You will always have a boss.
Yeah. And I am a little bit of a control freak about certain things, unfortunately. Uh, so the thought of kind of relinquishing that sort of control that I suppose we have over stuff, I really, you'd have to be offering me a huge amount of money to not have that, because it's such a liberating feeling, and I'm very I'm very appreciative for what we have, and I'm sure I'm receive certain benefits being a certain type of person, but I think also we have worked quite hard to get to this point, and I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not something I would leave
that's
for,
interesting.
for almost anything, I think.
Yeah. Well, this is it, isn't it? It's like. So the other thing I wanted to pull out was you said, give up all the things we are doing at Influx. It's interesting when you say that sort of stuff, because someone who's moving from one publisher to another might say, "Oh, be ashamed to lose my authors," or "It will be a shame to leave the team that I'm in." But what you're saying here, all the things we are doing, suggests a lot more than just a job role. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just more than, because that's how I feel about it. Is I'm like, this isn't just publishing some books. We're trying to create, or we have maybe half successfully created a community, or developed our own community and our own, what you might call, quote unquote, scene, if you wanted to be a wanker about it, which I might well be. And that to me is a huge part of it, where we're basically from nothing, essentially. We can do events at various places around the country. We can do lots of different stuff online. We know so many authors and other publishers that we didn't know 9 years ago. We could have just, equally, if we had never started Influx, for example, our lives would look incredibly different.
They would, yeah, and I think that's a really key thing, and I think this is probably true for most people who set up their own press. It becomes inevitably a huge part of your identity, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And your life, it's without sounding too wanky, it's not just a job at this point, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of integrated into almost everything I do, which I think that brings occasional downsides to it, because you need to know when to stop working. Do you know what I mean? Stop checking emails and things like that. But which I think applies to lots of small business people, I think, and freelancers. But yeah, it becomes part of your identity. And to be honest, I like that being a part of my identity. So
yeah, it's interesting.
You'd be throwing all of that away, and I just wouldn't do it.
I wonder. Well, this is the thing. I wonder whether. I mean, we can only speak for ourselves. And I wonder whether someone who works, to use Hachette again as an example, someone who works at Hachette feels they derive their identity from working at Hachette or not. I don't know. I can't answer that question. But I know from my perspective, I'm the same as you. I enjoy meeting people, talking about publishing, talking about books, yada yada yada. But also that there's something more to it, in the sense of not even identity, but just knowing that we almost represent what Influx is, as much as Influx represents what we are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a symbiotic relationship, I think, and that I like, because even though, let's say, for example, the way we've discussed this before, but the way we work is generally we commission a book and work with the writer and take the book all the way through production individually. And we might term it internally, oh, so-and-so is your author, or so-and-so is my author, right? But when one of, quote-unquote, your authors does really well, I can bask in that ray of sunshine, and I find that really fun. And I wonder whether that's quite the same in another publishing house.
Yeah,
where there probably is like rivalries amongst other editors. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up, but I imagine there's a competitive atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I really wouldn't want to comment on that. I can only got my experience at Titan. I think the team was fairly supportive there, but it is different for what we do, because again, you have to work so closely, and the success of a book is a success for the press in general, right?
Yeah.
And essentially, what you're saying is, we like I said earlier, we see a project, a book as a project from start to finish, don't we?
Mm.
It doesn't mean you work on every single aspect of it,
No.
but you're the main contact point of that, and you'll probably be the editor and so on and so forth. And I think that's quite a natural way of working. I think it just makes sense.
Yeah, we can come on to that in a second. The other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit in terms of community and stuff like that is, I love going into like Foyles and Charing Cross or Houseman's or Burley Fisher or whatever, and knowing the staff, and just going in and be like, "Oh, hi Gary," or "Hi Patrick," or that sort of stuff, and "Hi Clive," or "Hi Sam," or whatever, and or whatever, and you go in and there's a connection with those other people, and it's not just because you work in the same industry. It's not that. There's something deeper than that, I think.
Yeah, I like to think so, especially with the independent bookstores, and that's something I've deeply enjoyed over the last few years. Is you mentioned doing events kind of all over the UK now, and that's been very, very rewarding in building up those sort of relationships with bookstores. I don't know, at the Book Corner in Halifax did a fantastic. You weren't there for that one, I don't think, but brilliant event there with Paul Scraton.
I've never been to the north, so.
I'm trying to think where else, but you know what I mean, though, and just getting the opportunities to do all of those kind of things, and across Europe as well. And I've lost my point because I was just laughing at what you just said.
So I think we're talking about building community and finding people around the country who almost like-minded, I suppose, or have a similar outlook or perspective on what publishing should be.
So something I really like is that we essentially have to be involved in all aspects of publishing, right? So that's acquisitions. It's, as you mentioned, doing the editing. We'll be involved in choosing designers and the book cover design. We're involved in publicity. Obviously, we have a guy helping out with publicity, Jordan, now, doing great work there. But we're involved in every stage of it, including the events, and we have to be the public face of things, don't we? We're required, I think, to be there on stage, visible, doing what we do, which maybe not for everyone. Not everyone likes doing that, but I think that's something we had to get used to, is being, I suppose, a public presence, and being able to get up on stage and introduce events or host events or get out there and talk about what we're doing. And I really like that kind of live aspect of what we do. And that's something I really miss during the lockdown. I mean, for me, one of the big, you know this, of course, and anyone who knows me will know this, but for me, like the kind of big cultural inspirations for setting up something independent, and I think this is the same for you, it's probably more from music, really, in the world of like independent labels. I'm very vocal about my love of sort of, independent punk and hardcore stuff. So I always looked to, when I was a teenager, so massively influenced by, I don't know, labels like Discord or I don't know, Chemical Underground, that was like Mogwai's label, or Corpus Christi or Fat Wreck. I just thought, that's great. People can set up things themselves and create their own scene.
Well, I mean, I was exactly the same with UK hip hop and also with jungle and stuff like that. Like, I think you can just see, sometimes it's funny, you buy records, it could be, from my perspective, it's like Jazz Fudge or Low Life or anything like that, which were the record labels. And what was interesting was you buy the record and then eventually you sort of figured out there's just like one or two people behind it. And you're like, oh, so this isn't just this faceless thing where I can't tell what's going on. Actually, there's someone I can just phone up who runs the label, and I can be like, oh yeah, have you got this copy? I'd like, and it's that idea that there's humans behind it, a couple of humans just doing their thing out of passion, that I think I kind of absorbed a little bit, rather than, I never thought about where my more pop, I suppose, records came from. I didn't think, oh, this is a BMI record, I can't wait to listen to this. You know what I mean? So certainly when you get exposed to that independent world, and then you begin to understand it's feasible to do it yourself. It's
a powerful lesson.
Isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we definitely share. And then I thought being interested in writing, I suppose, gravitated towards stuff that had this kind of similar feel to it. So Influx first book was out in 2012. What kind of independent stuff was around at the time? I was aware of what Social Disease did. I think I maybe had one or two of their books.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what Social Disease was? It's defunct now, isn't it?
It is defunct. Well, I think I don't actually know much about it other than Heidi James, who's a great novelist and short story writer, ran it. And it's the only book I've ever had from Social Disease was Lee Rourke's Every Day.
I've got a copy of that somewhere as well.
I think Lee will tell you quite happily that they all sort of congregated online in the early days of like MySpace and all that sort of stuff, and then some physical things came out of it, like Social Disease. I think that's the story behind it. Certainly, though, with around about that time, I had picked up a couple of like books from the Dalston Oxfam, which were like by Express, which was a previous, I think they'd been defunct by then, but that was like a Black interest literature publisher. And there was, who was the guys that used to publish Two at Home? No Exit or something? What were they called? Or No Press or Not a Press? Or
he's been published by so many different ones. I do, I forget the exact name, but that would be for me as well. Like you'd go into maybe Houseman's or something. They'd have the kind of Stuart Home novels, and they were published by a kind of wide range of fairly small little presses, and that definitely caught my interest. His work as well always caught my interest because of its kind of connections to some of the sort of skinhead stuff and stuff like that, and
I think that
and psychogeography, how it related to those things, always really interested me.
They were certainly his books are certainly the ones that I sort of realised was independently published, and it's difficult sometimes to work out what's what and what's going on. I also knew about Salt, I think, by that point as well. But yeah, as things have progressed, I've learned loads and loads and loads more publishing houses existed back then, but I don't know I was necessarily exposed to them in the way that a lot of people seem to be exposed to independent publishers now.
I don't think like Twitter or book Twitter was quite as evolved, is that the right word, as it is now? Yeah,
maybe evolved. I don't know. I think it's evolved, if anything. But
it's interesting you mentioned Mark Fisher, though. I was just thinking back to, I've had a big love of kind of aspects of zine culture, which is always very strongly attached to that kind of DIY punk culture. So Laura Oldfield Ford, yes. Well, I think it's changed her name now to Laura. Is it Laura Grace Ford? Anyway.
Yeah.
I found out about her stuff, Savage Messiah, through reading this kind of, it was quite well produced kind of punk DIY vegan-y sort of magazine called Last Hours, and they interviewed lots of...
I remember Last Hours, yeah.
Yeah, people making kind of interesting, I suppose, DIY published stuff, and she was in there. Then I became aware of like Savage Messiah, which then got collected and published by Verso. Mark Fisher gave a nice intro to that, and that sort of, I wouldn't say direct inspiration for Influx, but it kind of galvanized me into thinking, oh, wow, you can write about these things. You can do this sort of kind of scratchy style and putting quotes from Ballard and Georges Bataille whilst talking about squat parties and all that. I thought it was fantastic. I do think it's fantastic. And that was a huge inspiration, well, just to start finding all this stuff.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting, because I think at that point that we were discovering this sort of stuff, neither of us were looking to get a job in publishing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was more about producing culture.
Yeah,
than it was about, we're going to start a press to be part of the publishing scene. Do you know what I mean? Because it was actually, I think the emphasis was more on, hey, we want to contribute to this burgeoning culture around this stuff, than it was, hey, we want to be award nominated and stocked in Waterstones. You know what I mean? Like, like, I don't think that ever occurred to us, even when we started, that we would be further along the line in 8 years' time, like being, I think, what ostensibly might be a more mainstream in a way in our operations publishing house. I wouldn't say we're mainstream in what we publish necessarily, but the way we operate is slightly more normal.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to pick up that thought, so why do we do that? I suppose we want this to be sustainable. I think it's fine to say I'd like us to sell books, and for our authors, I want those books to be available fairly easily to people. So I think there's a kind of mainstream way of doing things in terms of just the book trade itself.
Yeah.
And we engage with that up to a certain point. But I also think we do lots of stuff, I suppose, the more old-fashioned indie way. Like we do huge amounts of sales still online, direct sales, book fairs, events, hand selling, as they call it, like that. And I'm quite happy with that mix. I think, I wouldn't want to say, we're just going to reject the kind of mainstream book trade. I don't really see what the point in that would be. I don't know what point I would be making.
No, I don't think you would be making a point unless you were deliberately doing that because the stuff that you publish is inherently contrary to whatever the publishing world is putting out.
Yeah.
So if you were, let's say, publishing in order to produce some sort of anarchist revolution or something like that, you might not want to do it in the same way that it's always been done. But I think essentially we publish, most of what we publish is fiction, do some non-fiction, but we believe fiction should be read by everybody, and that there isn't a barrier. There shouldn't be a barrier to reading the sort of stuff that we want to publish. And actually, what we want to publish pushes the boundaries somewhat. But we want. There's no point in just having an audience that's tiny that appreciates those boundary pushers in a sort of elitist, arty, farty way. Like we want everyone to read the books. So then if we want everyone to read the books, you have to put the books in the places where people buy books.
Absolutely.
do build our community, and we do build all that stuff as well. But it's kind of churlish to ignore that stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And going back to events and stuff, it's why I actually, as much fun as it is doing events in London, where I think we've got a fairly, I think there's a number of enough people who would come and attend an Influx event in London because it's an Influx event, and I think that's great. And I think there is that little scene, as you put it. But I much prefer going and doing stuff in places where I'm not familiar with them or people don't know who we are, because I think that's a great way of reaching people and speaking to new audiences. It's just a personal thing. I find it very gratifying.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you go up north and I don't have to.
I like doing it as a writer as well, just myself. I remember doing a reading somewhere in Hastings. Gareth Rees had set it up, and the audience could not give a shit. And I thought, this is great. I've actually got to try and make myself, known on stage. I think that's a great thing to have to do.
Well, it's a challenge, isn't it? And it's a good challenge. So I wanted to move on to maybe talking about so I think we're going to do this. I'm sort of stumbling on my words a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit about the downside. So if someone were to, say, set up an independent press now, what advice would you give them? Sort of, we can share this, obviously, so it's a question for both of us, but professional sort of advice in terms of what do's and don'ts in terms of doing the press, but also do's and don'ts personally, like what to be wary of, like I think you've touched on a little bit in terms of like the work can just consume your life, and you need to put down some boundaries and say, I'm not working this weekend, I'm not working for 4 days. The idea that I think it's only in the last couple of years that we've given ourselves holidays in that respect. Like you put it in a calendar and gone, I'm on holiday. I don't think that didn't happen about 3 years ago.
No, it didn't. So what my advice be? I think there's two bits there. Like if you're starting and you want to do it, like beyond, if you want to do it in a way that we didn't want to do, we just wanted to produce a book. That's fine. But if you're actually thinking, right, I want to do a press, you need to, like you said, you need to come up with dreadfully boring things like business plans. Think how many books do we want a year, and really get as much information as possible, because I think for a lot of people when they start out, there's probably a temptation to maybe like overprint. I know stories of people where their first book, they thought, right, we started a new press, loads of excitement, maybe in a Twitter bubble, we print 5,000 copies, and then, oh shit, we've only sold 500. And
Mm.
that could be quite dispiriting for people. Whereas if you've printed 500 and you sell them all, brilliant
Great.
start to things.
Yeah, exactly.
You see what I mean? So I just think very, very carefully about the financial side of things and just get as much work done in advance as possible. I mean,
I think there is a temptation. I think we, although, you know, as you say, we didn't start out thinking we were going to be a press going for a long time or whatever. It just sort of moved in that way. But I think there is a temptation to be like, right, we've got the logo, we've got the book, bang, let's just go, you know, and that does work, but it's going to take you a hell of a lot longer to get where you want to be if you don't
yeah.
put in like all the planning and make the connections. And I think, you know, when we started, as we've often said before, you know, we asked a couple of people how it works. We asked Tom at Pen to the Margins, and he was like, yeah, it's like this, this, and this. And then we just figured it out. We figured it out along the way by making mistakes. And, you know, I think we could have asked more people at the beginning if we were thinking, right, we're going to do a proper press. We would have asked maybe even like 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 people.
Yeah, but we weren't really. So, but
That's
wasn't our. Yeah.
That's what I would advise anybody
Yeah,
else.
and I think what you've said about patience is good. Don't rush everything. Make sure you've got all your ducks in a row before you launch. Because I think this applies to a lot of creative projects and creative people. The temptation to announce that you're doing something or you've done something on Facebook, Twitter before you've actually done it is very, very high.
Yeah.
It might have even been you. So there's some kind of psychology attached to this. Like as soon as you've announced it, it kind of feels like you've done it, but you haven't done it. So then actually doing it becomes more like a chore.
Yeah.
It's not a good way to do things. I'd say don't jump the gun on stuff. Especially if you don't have anything to show for it. It's like, great, we're setting up a press. Until you've got a book, stuff to actually get out there, it's all academic, I think.
It is. I think there's, you know, at the same time, you want to say there is a certain, it depends what you're looking for. If you're setting up a press and you're looking for books, that's fine to say, right, we're opening, we're looking for books. You've got the books lined up, also great. I think there's definitely that temptation of saying, you know, some people, this is a personal bugbear, but some people will say, got some news coming. And you're like, well, okay, well, why can't you just tell me the news? Like, why are you telling me it's coming? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? You know? I think, what about the, I think the other things you've got to be wary of, from my perspective, is how difficult it is to sell books.
Yeah.
You know, like, you might have support from lots of people, but beyond your community, beyond your circle, you know, getting someone to buy a book in a bookshop that you've never visited in a town you don't know about is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and without knowing the distribution process and knowing how all of that works is very hard. So getting as much info about just how books are actually sold into bookshops.
Yeah, absolutely. And then understanding how PR works, I think, also is quite key. And what I often say to people who ask me about that sort of stuff, particularly about book PR, is, you know, if someone says no, fine, let's move on to the next person. You know, one editor says, "Oh, we can't feature that. We don't want to feature it." It's like, fine, all right. It doesn't mean that idea is a bad idea. It doesn't mean that someone else won't take a review for that book. You just be like, okay, not for you, right, next, not for you, right, next. And you just keep hammering it. And eventually they'll like one and they'll feature it. Generally, I think that's how it works.
Yeah, so to pick up on that theme, and this relates to the idea that, you know, why we do it. We like the fact it's to do, you know, it's us, part of our identities. But then the risk is, of course, if you get, I don't know, a bad review or people aren't picking up your pitches, the trick, I would say, and this is absolutely crucial advice, is not to take things personally. Do you know what I mean? And of course, the temptation, because this is your baby, isn't it? This is your press. Oh no, they gave it a 3-star review, or whatever. It would be easy to take those things personally, or go, "Oh, this person hasn't responded to my request for a review."
Yeah.
My advice is always on these things: you need to keep it professional. Do you know what I mean? I think that applies to so many things, and just don't let things get to you on a personal level, because I think, and certainly don't broadcast that publicly, because it just looks, I think it looks really, really bad. No one likes the bitter or jealous look. Do you know what I mean?
No, but we do a lot of moaning about publishing, like publicly. I think that's okay. We can talk about how X isn't. You know, we've even in these discussions we've talked about our issue with prizes and stuff like that. I don't think I'm not against people saying stuff in public. Maybe it's more like it depends. If the review is clearly got an agenda, that's maybe different. You can definitely talk about that.
Yeah,
I think. But if it's just a review, whatever. I don't know. Yeah. I think there's a delicate balance to be had, and sometimes we work it, sometimes we don't. Where you can talk about the industry and changes needed in the industry as a whole, but when it becomes about the individual, that's, I think, when it becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think you're allowed to criticize things, but I don't think it should be personalized. Or does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Right, a couple of minutes left, but so there was I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
You were talking earlier about being involved in the process along the way, and how you wouldn't. Can you explain a little bit why you wouldn't be allowed to be like that in a bigger publishing house, but also why you love that so much?
Well, again, that comes back to being a bit of a control freak. So, just based on my own experience, and of course this will be true at bigger companies, there's different departments. This is standard for almost any company. So if you work in editorial, it's highly unlikely you're going to have any say in, let's say, how a book is publicized, or you might have a say in the book's cover design, but often you won't. Now, if it's a book you commissioned that you really loved, it might be, I wouldn't like then not having any say in how the end product comes out looking. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend like the sales aspect of stuff is hugely fun, but I like having, I like knowing how it works. I like having some say in how things are done that way as well. Do you know what I mean? And I just think for me, it's just kind of healthier. I don't feel like I'm just a little cog in one small part of this kind of big grinding machine that doesn't have really contact with other departments. I've really enjoyed getting to grips with other aspects of it, like, I don't know, rights sales and doing all that sort of stuff, which I know it wasn't even something I even knew was a thing back in 2011.
Yeah. I had no idea how that worked either.
And I've really enjoyed being, going to London Book Fair, Frankfurt Book Fair, all that kind of stuff, because they're kind of mini adventures. Because we're doing it for ourselves. I don't know. Was that an answer?
Yeah, that is the Frankfurt and London Book Fair thing, though. What my problem with that sometimes is we are doing it for ourselves, and that's brilliant. But that means our expenses claims are against ourselves.
Yeah.
So everyone who's at Frankfurt who's working for PRH or Simon & Schuster or Macmillan or whatever, they've got expenses, right? They're smashing the booze, loads of food. Every time I'm buying around, I'm like...
Whereas we're sat in the Airbnb, economy vodka, tin of beans.
maybe a Frankfurter. The other aspect of... I mean, I agree with all of that, of what you said, and I really love all that stuff as well. But there's no one to blame. Imagine, like, you're brilliant, you're doing this amazing book, and you're editor, and then it flops. You can turn around and be like, wow, marketing, that's why, it wasn't me, the editor. Yeah. Or if you're in marketing, you can be like, well, you should have edited it better. We don't have anybody else to pass the buck to.
I think that's true, but
I like to get out of it.
So maybe to go into the negative side, or things people should think about on a personal level, is you've got to stand up and take responsibility for certain things. Yeah,
and there's upsides and downsides, right? So when a book, let's say recently, Showing Pinto's Plastic Emotions gets shortlisted for the Encore Award, I feel that quite deeply, that sense of pride and whatever, because I'm so invested in that book. Equally, if a book gets totally ignored, that hurts me in a way I don't know, again, this is conjecture, but I don't know whether it's hurt on the same level, because I feel like I've messed up the PR, I've also messed up the marketing, I've messed up the editorial, I haven't managed to get it in the right people's hands.
So I would say you need to watch our podcast about prizes. What? But no, I agree with you, because you know how it works and you know the system. But of course, it smarts a little bit, doesn't it? When
not just about prizes. I mean, like in the sense of, when a book doesn't do as well as you're expecting it to do, and you do sit there and think, well, what did I do wrong? And because you're on every stage, you do end up thinking I think you take the burden of it a little bit more than you might if you're not at every stage.
Yeah, I think so, definitely, because you're so invested in it in so many ways, emotionally invested, but also you think, well, I want it to do well because then it will help the business grow, and there's so many, and you've probably got a good relationship with the author, you want it to do well for them, and there's huge amount of investment in it. So my other advice would be, we alluded to this, is it's just knowing when to get a bit of a balance. My partner says I work too much sometimes. The temptation to be checking the emails Saturday morning, stuff like that, is quite high.
It's very high.
Because I could literally be working 24 hours a day.
There's always something to do.
Yeah, which I actually think is a really good thing, but it's just knowing when to just go, all right, let's have a bit of a breather.
Yeah, because eventually, you won't be able to do any work because you'll be locked up in a hospital.
Yeah, or an insane asylum.
Yeah, whatever it is, you wish you would have had a massive burnout, and I think there's definitely a danger of that.
I think burnout's definitely a possibility, especially if you're trying to, let's say, you want to keep costs low because you think, well, I'm not going to, get a freelance copy editor or something. I'll do this all myself. That's a surefire way of probably burning yourself out.
So here's another question. It's probably to finish it up, actually, and I am thinking of our friend Nathan Connolly, who runs Dead Ink, a very good friend of ours. Although obviously on Twitter we say that we hate him.
It's all banter.
So
you can't have that kind of banter, you see, if you work at a big five publisher.
No, you can't, can you? Anyway,
you can't be silly in the way we can be.
Nathan more or less works on his own. He more or less runs. I mean, he doesn't. But I think one of the things I appreciate about Influx is having you there. It's having someone else at the exact same decision making level, exact same. We have our differences and we have our clashes and we have things differently, but I can talk to you through something, or we can make collective decisions about the business, etc. It doesn't feel as it's just so raging against one person, kind of against the system or whatever. And I feel like if I was to say to someone said to me, I want to start a press, I'd be like, get someone to work with to do it with you.
Yeah, I think it's really useful to have people to bounce ideas off of and just talk things through, because I think we all make mistakes sometimes, or just sometimes haven't considered, maybe a different perspective on things. And that it's
also quite fun when you say, quote unquote, I agree with you. And I feel like I've just had a little victory. How do you get that if you're on your own? It's impossible.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's probably quite a few. Are there quite a few one-man outfits of small presses? I think there probably are.
I think Charles Boyle is probably the senior editions is probably the biggest I can think of. Yeah, I mean, but there are funnily enough, a lot of sort of spousal varieties. So Galley Beggar Spousal Press. That's what I'm going to call it. Own It, Crystal and Jason.
See, I really admire people who could do that.
Blue Moose.
I'm going to be honest. No, couldn't do that.
No, I mean, yeah.
I like to suppose to keep my professional life and my private life slightly separate. Do you know what I mean?
I'm glad for that. I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I don't want to know everything about you. I agree. I think I would find that very difficult. But then, people work.
It's whatever works for people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, let's wrap this up. So that was kind of wise. I guess, last question. What do you think you'd be doing if you weren't doing this?
That is a good question. I really don't know.
Because I was running pubs, and before that I was kind of working for a music academy in Newham, kind of in education-ish. I wonder whether I either would have kind of re-entered education and become a teacher or something like that, or somewhere along those lines, or I might have just gone into kind of some sort of communications job, like maybe doing communications for like politics or something. I don't know. Like that's how it feels. I don't know whether I would have touched publishing at all. I might have been writing, but I don't think I would have touched the business end of publishing if we hadn't.
Yeah, I don't think I would have either, because we were interested in the work, getting the writing out, including some of our own writing and that. I don't know. I was working kind of as an English tutor at the time, just getting sort of completely hammered at the weekends. Maybe I would have become a teacher. I don't know. I think Influx really helped give me a real focus and reason to kind of get out of bed and stop pissing about. Definitely. I think I'd probably be doing a job I enjoy a lot less than the one I actually do.
That's a very good way to end it. All right. So I'm guessing we'll be back next week.
I think so. I think we'll be back next week. Will it be a lockdown discussion though? Or will it just be a discussion?
Well, we'll stay. Come back next week. Yeah, somewhere. All right, man. Catch you later.